Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Okay, so we'll start right into it. So I'll start with asking Ms. Samuel about nowadays we're seeing a lot of changes, a lot of trends that are coming up almost on a very quick pace. And these changes will affect the workplace, will affect how do we train individuals, how do we build capabilities. So I'll start by asking you a question. How do you see these emerging technologies and new trends in IT changing the skill requirement in the workplace?
All right, so I think my voice is clear. So how many of you feel that they're in threat by artificial intelligence? Their jobs are being threatened. Nobody in the room feels threatened? That's great. So I think you don't need this, right? You don't need to hear about the challenges and about the threat. But seriously, is this something that you think about? Probably. Not every day though, right? You're nodding, sir. So I mean, the reason I'm asking you, I wanted to share a study with you, and the study is by Oxford, and it says that 97% of the US job market will be at risk of being automated, right? So that's a good number to know, right? And it's reflected in US. But there's another study that actually says that 97% of workers believe that the jobs will be automated, but not their jobs. So they see that AI is coming, it is going to impact a lot, but they don't feel the threat on themselves. Same applies for some of the companies. They know that the trend is coming, they know that there's a lot of changes, they know that this is real, and you see it in other companies, but not necessarily our company, right? Or maybe it will take us a long time. So that's when we talk about the challenges. Maybe the biggest challenge is the education and knowing, are we really knowing what we're facing? Do we really know what all these technologies, when they come, whether they are completely covering the market or not, whether people are aware or not, when are we going to get the real hit? Are we going to get it slow, or this is going to happen all of a sudden, you know, in the whole world? So I just had an interesting discussion with someone who's really dear in the room before getting in. And one of the things that we were talking about is, you know, one of the things I could say all of us need to know about AI. Do you really want to be technically savvy, knowing how to build a system in AI? Not everyone needs to know that. But we need to know how to deal with it. We need to know how it will impact our work. And in order to know that, we need to have the right mindset for it. If I'm a doctor, would I accept that an AI system will actually take 20% of my job? That's what needs education. That openness to know that this is needed. It will make our life better. It will make the company's performances better. But we need to know how to deal with it. So if we talk about educating people, you don't need to know the technology very well. You need to know what it does, when to use it, when to allow it, and how to allow it. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And the second one is everything and every day there is change. Every day there is a new startup coming and changing the way the work will be. It's just a matter of time to say, when are they going to take that part from us? So I would say that this is part of, you know, the challenge, and we can go on and go on, you know, about all of that. But changing cultures will remain as the main issue. I've worked with multiple companies on cultural and kind of training initiatives for innovation inside these companies. Our biggest problem is how do we get people to be in the right track to accept the change? So part of the biggest problems is not training the technical capacity, is not about, you know, the education, you know, per se in the corporate itself, but it's about the acceptance. How do we get people on the top, in the middle, at the bottom to say, this is how it is. We have to stay updated. We have to know how it's going to change us, right? And if we know that, all of us will not be at that threat because we'll be open towards something like that. So I would actually just leave people thinking with that, you know, for the time being.
That's an interesting point of view, Ms. Ahmed. So I guess the bottom line here is that you shouldn't be threatened. We should.
You should be, and we'll talk why.
You all should be threatened.
Mindset probably is the most difficult thing. You know, you could probably train people to know about technical capacities, but think of yourself. When was the last time you have changed your mind about something you totally, completely believe in, and how long would it take you? What would it take you actually? And that's probably the question. What would take you to change your point of view from here to look at something else, you know, over there? That is the real challenge. And we'll probably in other points we'll talk more about how do we really get that done in the next question maybe.
Okay, interesting. So you should be threatened. What do you think, Dr. Faris? Should we be threatened? I think what I got is that you should be threatened if you don't act on it, if you don't prepare yourself for the change. So this is a side question, Dr. Faris, I know, but should we be threatened or should we accept the change?
From my point of view as academic, I think yes, you have to be afraid.
Go freak out.
Yeah, but don't freak out. So the first thing that most companies face is they don't know what's the AI can benefits for their companies. In an academic field, do we have to provide you with a person who know everything about AI, or should we give you a fresh graduate and he can train later by another companies that provide AI technologies? That's a big issue, but for companies, for decision makers, they have to know that applications for AI are variety, and there's a lot of them in the market, but they categorized one of the four main things. The first thing is dealing with the employees, like data analysis and that softwares or applications that help employees do their job better. And the second category is dealing with the customer, like chatbot, like you saw yesterday, how they improve the quality of user experience and how it can reduce the cost for the companies. The third category is dealing with the processor or procedures that in the company, like planning and other things. These things can help the company with reducing cost and improve the employees themselves. The fourth and last one, dealing more with factories and automation things. And decision makers usually, they don't, they think of one of these categories, but there's a lot of them. There's many applications that can deal and help your company, but you need to know how you can employ AI in your company. And that's not a threat for everybody, but if you have employees, you have to give them training to face the competition.
Yes.
To stay in the competition.
That is absolutely true, Dr. Faris. And actually, it's not only limited to AI or emerging technologies. So this is the nature of the world. So the world is changing. If you don't keep up, you will be left behind, and hopefully we will have no one left behind. So I'll give you the same question, Ms. Amal. So to keep up with these changes, Dr. Faris gave us a quick recipe what is the action required and how to build the knowledge and skills in the workforce. So from your point of view as someone who's in the workplace, who's in entrepreneurship, what do you think? What is the action required?
So I'll recap basically what I said at the beginning. And we said the beginning is to acknowledge that we need to change, right? So this comes from top management and it cascades down to the organization. And sometimes it's triggered by certain groups in the company that have seen, the change, they have been exposed, and they feel that this is the right thing to do. Now, it's not easy. Even if the top management decided to revamp, there will be, certain restructural issues. If the generation at the bottom also decided that it's time to adopt technology and to bring, you still have issues because you have to climb up the ladder, get the approvals, make sure that you will be able to work in an environment that cultivates the change and will accept, a certain margin of error, right? Because every change will come with its own error, but the understanding that, yes, error might happen, But if we look at the percentage of error in comparison to the possibilities that will happen to the company if they did not adopt the change, then it will be acceptable. And this is part of what the groups need to do. What is the percentage? How do I really put it in a quantified way so we can accept people to get into that change, right? So one of the things that we need, and we call it the golden rule, you know, in looking at AI taking over, you know, the jobs and all of that. So someone once said, if your job is repetitive, if your job does not require, you know, a lot of analytical thinking and it's something that can be done every day with certain skills, then yes, this can be replaced easily, right? Anything that could repeat itself in a certain pattern in a particular amount of time, yes, you're in threat because the machine will do it in a shorter time, will do it in a faster time, and will do it with much higher accuracy, right? So what do we need to do in order to address and categorize all the jobs and see what needs to be done? The biggest trend now in most of the corporation is what we call the continuous learning system. You have to be continuously learning. What you've learned this morning must have changed, you know, in like a few hours sometimes if you look at technology, especially technology companies. That means you're always on the go. Someone also once told me, Amal, utilize Google Trends, you know, at the bottom of the computer. So you know every second you get that alert that tells you what has changed in that market or in that product and all of that. So how would corporation adopt into this? That is the big golden question, right? Because today we do trainings, today we go to conferences, today in order to stay updated. But the thing is, realizing that the strategy can change is important from the top. And then allow this continuous learning as part of the daily job. And that's the trend that some of the companies are doing. If I realize that part of my job will require researching and learning, that should be part of your hours. And that's in the corporate side. So digitization of the online learning. Today, everyone who wants to learn a new thing, where do you go? Where do you go? Do you have to travel? Where do you go? If you want to learn something, sir, now, where do you go? Google, right? And then after Google, if you want a specified program, where do you go? Udemy or, you know, Udacity or whatever, and then you go into more technical, specified and all of that. So digitization, you know, when it comes to the education system today is something that companies are already getting into, but personalization is what needs to happen as well. How do I make it personal where I don't watch the course and I skip 90% of it and I only really like that 10% because the rest is not useful for me, right? So personalization, tracking your pattern as an employee, that is doable, and that's where AI will come, you know, in place, realizing the trends in the workplace, the movement, you know, the tracking of the behavior, movement into comparison of numbers, and at the end of the day, the biggest question is asking why are we doing the change? If I, as an employee, do not know why this change is happening to me, most likely I will not support it, and I'm not going to be bought into it, and I'm not going to be completely heart and soul, you know, let's say, you know, completely bought into it. So there is a lot of like segments that I think that needs to be looked at, but there's also companies here in Saudi that started to look into that and how to utilize, you know, the change that needs to be done. But continuous learning system needs to be looked at in healthcare, in education, in technology, in services, even in investment and in entrepreneurship, meaning that everything needs to be evolved and you have to be really looking into, you know, how are you going to cultivate it and stay alive with it, right? So he wants to oppose now a little bit. So.
No, I would like to add something because I like when you say continuously learning.
Yeah.
For decision maker, it's
difficult.
No, it's sometimes it's costly, so they don't see benefits, but you cannot see it right now, but it's really important. So train your employees, and instead of thinking of replace them, no, invest in your employees and train them. There's many online platform for teaching, and also graduate level at universities provide good quality of learning, and you can cooperate with many universities inside Saudi Arabia or any other country, and that will be beneficial for the company. But you cannot see the results right now. You may need years to see it, but it's really important to emphasize that.
Absolutely.
Dr. Faris, well, I'll continue on the same subject. So you were talking about, you both were talking about continuous learning and training the employees. We know that traditional training, traditional employee improvement is costly. But what do you think? Can we have or can we introduce new tools? Is there any new tools, any new methods that we can cut down the budget or the cost of these requirements?
That's a good question, but let's have a question here. If we have a graduate student with AI bachelor degree, let's say, do you think he will deal with the business problems? No. What does he need? He needs experience. So you need both of them to face any problem or to solve your problem in the company. So if we work on just working on the part as like in the universities we focus on AI and this technology, and companies should not expect that these employees or if they get a student from us, he will do everything. That's important. I don't know if you want to add something.
What about in the workplace, Ms. Emil? What tools, methods, and procedures we can develop for capacity building? And I'm sorry, I just added this angle, but and the cost angle, because I think Dr. Faris brought up a good point, which is some of these training, continuous learning could be costly. So how can we also develop these tools and procedures in a way that we can also cut down the cost?
Well, I think most of the stuff that we just spoke about are really not that costly in comparison to, the let's say the losses that could be in the company. I think that's important, that needs to be looked at. I don't think it's looked at from an HR point of view, right? That I provide this amount, of dollar per employee for his training. But it's done in isolation from the big picture of the company, and it shouldn't be like that. That is the way that it used to be long time ago, in HR today. Today, it's about, developing all of that. So I'll give an example that's probably a little bit off topic. The hiring process today, you still do, in most of the companies, receive the CVs, the typical ones. Some of the companies developed into videos. Some of the companies would send you an email and you fill a test and all of that. And based on that, you do the hiring, right? Now, most of the new startups today are utilizing AI in order to match make with companies. So I would cut down your 6 months of a recruit of an executive, into a 1 week. And your 1 month of a recruit of a certain employee into probably, 4 or 5 days, and you have a short-listed, employees that's probably most applicable and fit to your culture. So if we look at the education and all of that, we need to look at the root cause at the beginning. Why do we need to train, and when do we need to start training from the beginning? And how do we really avoid, rather than recruiting someone and I have to really spend $100,000 in order to also get them ready, right? So we need to look at all of the parties. And the other most important part, which I think it's really important, the current employees that I want to retain. These are not new employees that I'm going to spend training on. So how do I really develop those? So here we talk about what are the sort of skills that I need them in order to match them to the new, job. So one of the new things today, when you have AI, cultivating big data and all of that, so you definitely need data scientists, and you also need, behavioral economists. And that's intriguing for me, because we have a lot of economists in the market, but we don't have a lot of behavioral economists. Why do I need a behavioral economist? To translate my data and tell me the action points and why my customers are acting in a certain way. So going back, is it costly? Is it expensive? It might be costly at the beginning when you're developing the tool, but later on, you're actually reducing the cost of training, reducing the cost of learning, and reducing the span of how long would people take in order to catch up with a new trend, right? So I think overthinking in large organizations sometimes causes a lot of trouble, right? So it's understandable because of the size and because of what goes and the policies and the procedures and all of that. But it's about time that people look into it and companies are looking into that. The other dilemma in AI that's facing a lot of companies is the policies and the procedures and the ethical factors of it. And again, employees need to know all of that. And we've heard about a couple of scandals now in large companies in US that had certain great violations when it comes to AI. So you're really developing a full tool system. Maybe it sounds a lot, but that investment of time, and money at the beginning is worth it, building a future of a company that could keep up with what's happening.
Also, to clarify that, is there any specific tools? The answer is no, but you can
customize and create.
You customize it to your needs, to fit your needs, or you can build a new need that nobody finds a solution for it. And there's a lot of companies out there who just try to find a customer to deal with this problem.
Yeah, I like that. So basically what Ms. Amal is saying, think about long-term strategic planning or long-term strategic thinking. Dr. Faris, so what do you see as the biggest challenge in keeping up with these trends?
Convince the decision makers that the AI and machine learning is a new trend and they need to adopt it in their companies. I think that's one of the most challenges. Also, in the academic field, if there's a new trend, you see a pressure that we should customize our curriculum to fit that trend. However, that's what not universities have to deal with. In universities, we prepare students to have the basic knowledge for IT in general. Then has certain topics in AI, so he will have basic knowledge of AI. When he graduates, he will continue learning in that field or any other field. Because as I said earlier, we cannot have a specific program for each trend. That will be, I don't know, crazy maybe?
And I think part of the continuous learning, if I may add, it's not only about us as humans. When we say continuous learning, there's also continuous learning systems. So the more the system learns, right, the smarter you also become in your decisions at work. So it's about cultivating the two, right? The more info you have and the more data you have, your job will become, more informed, when it comes to that. So it's about changing really how systems operate, in the whole picture and how people also operate when it comes to learning.
Okay. Since you've already talked about it, Dr. Faris, I'll just ask you another question because people keep asking these questions, and this is, let's say, unspecialized or unacademic people. They keep asking these questions. Why do universities not create programs specialized for these trends? You've mentioned one thing, that it is crazy to open a program for each trend, but would you like to
I will give you an example.
Talk more about that? Yeah.
I would like to give an example. Like 10 years ago, it was a trend that cloud computing, right? So let's say if we started 10 years ago and have a program that just for cloud computing bachelor degree, and he will graduate after 5 years, which is like 5 years ago. Do you think he will find the job right now? Because the trend is different now and it's AI. So he will have to continuous learning a lot, more than any other students who's computer science, for example. So that's my point of view. I don't know if in industry, do you
I have a
like
different
that?
I have a different question for Musamil. It's how do you build capabilities at the individual level to keep up with these changes?
So it's, it's basically what we're talking about. But there's an interesting saying that I heard, once, and it says, if you're looking to build those capacities and capabilities, and you don't know which technological part that you want to focus on or you will be good at, or is it really the right fit for you, and it says just look and find what is human. When I say what's human, it's about the part that we as humans can empathize and feel, right? Which the machine still has a long way in order to feel and may never feel, right? So a machine can recognize empathy, but cannot feel empathy. And always humans will be ahead of time, when it comes to that. And we will always need people that empathize and feel and sees what the machines cannot really see, right? I don't think we'll ever replace all of the healthcare, employees with machine. That's not gonna work. We still go to the doctor, not for the medicine, not for the x-ray, just to be assured. And it's about the job to be done at the end of the day. What is the job to be done for corporations? What is the job to be done for us as humans? What is the job to be done in any company that opens today? There is something that is purely human about providing that service. So how do we get people to do more, when it comes to that, and how do we really define it? And that's part of the golden question that we're talking about. So on the individual level, we talked about continuously learning and dedicating the time, to be always up to date. If that's my industry, it's not only my company's role to tell me what to do. It's a personal interest to get yourself up to date, to attend the right conferences and forums that will bring me up to date to that. It's about online education that's completely accessible. In the past 3 weeks, I attended 3 courses. Today, I'm starting a new one in a topic that I'm passionately, about. Do I have the time? I have to make the time. I have to say that every day at 7, from 7 to 8, this is the time where I'm going to sit online and read and see what is the latest of this and that. So there is discipline into it. There's discipline on the individual level that will make you want to do and want to really, be updated when it comes to that. And they say always follow the leaders. Who's the leader in that industry? What are they saying about that industry? What are they doing when it comes to that? So that's another part as well when it comes to the individual part. And build communities and networks. Today, if we were to give any system or advice, it's about building and connecting networks. You're talking about AI, you want a global network and know what is happening in AI globally so you can talk about it, and that's what's going to trigger new ideas. You talk in education, then you have to be connected. And I'm not saying east, west, or which part of the world. It's about the collective knowledge that people can cultivate when they actually think together. And maybe always, I like to talk about the empathy and listening to the customers. Whatever the service that I'm creating, whatever the technology that I will be using, if I don't build it on the demands and the needs of the customers, there's no AI system that's going to fix it for me, at the end of the day. So
Absolutely.
Your learning and development has to be connected to the needs and to the requirements, and based on that, you will decide what to do. But I see a huge responsibility individually if we are up to, getting up to date when it comes to all of these changes. Otherwise, we'll never keep up.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
True. And I think this venue is one of the places where we can connect to similar-minded people. I guess this is all for me. So any final remarks from you, Dr. Faris?
I think we should listen to you a little bit.
Thank you very much. I've already spoken yesterday, so I think I've already...
You did your part of all the
Yeah,
speech.
I've already done my part. What about you, Ms. Amal? Do you have any final remarks?
I already concluded, but I would say those gentlemen and those ladies that are sitting in the room are here because you're looking for an answer of a question, or you're looking for something new. So there's a reason why you left your job, or your office, or your house, or you flew in, either to connect with somebody, either to learn something new, either to stay updated, or even to exhibit a new product in the next room. So understanding why do you want to do what you're doing will always guide you to know what you should be learning. And if you develop that iterative approach in thinking and that mindset that always ask this question of why before accepting and getting into something, I think that would change a lot.
Beautiful.
But thank you for hosting us here.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you, guys.
All right, we're done.
Yeah,
Do we
we're
have
done.
any
Thank you.
questions
Well,
for
thank you
the
so much
panelists?
for listening to us. Do you have any Q&A?
Any questions for the panelists?
We still have questions. So, yeah. Yeah, sure.
First of all, thank you so much.
No, it's-
Now, I'm from India. Now, cervical cancer in India, the second most common cancer in Indian woman. Okay, there was around 67,000 mortalities. Okay, so we were talking all this a while, like how do we make the upcoming generation to give them challenges, right?
Yeah.
For us, last 2 years back, it was a challenge for a small team.
Yes.
And what we did is, there is a diagnostic tools available.
Yes.
So we made a small, portable cervical cancer detection machine,
Yes.
which can be utilized by any smaller hospitals.
Yeah.
So in one way, I would say that this is my just an opinion. We have to make these upcoming generations to understand the pain points
Yes.
in a bigger level, like, so that we give them challenges. So, like you're a university, so you would be allowing them to do so. That's this my question. Would you be allowing the upcoming generation to take the challenges?
If you allow me just to comment on that, well, thank you so much, because that's I like the fact that you connected it to healthcare. Healthcare always, takes my
Yes.
attention.
I'm very much into that. I'm working in healthcare for past 15 years.
But exactly what you're saying is about identifying problems.
Yes.
Because if I know what is the problem,
Yeah.
I'll be able to create the solution. And
That's
that's
right.
part of you, when we said empathy,
Yes.
in the heart of it is about critical thinking, analyzation, customer discovery, going on the ground, knowing what's the reality. And then that cervical cancer device, instead of, costing us like 20 or 30 million dollars in order to treat or treat those women, right? You're
right.
talking about diagnostics, which is about preventative medicine, right?
Yes, yes.
So you're talking about major economic values. And you're absolutely correct. If we're able to train of how to have these eyes, and we go back to the mindset that doesn't look at obstacles, it only looks at what is the cause, how do we really look into it, and then the answers will start to come. And then you develop which technology would work out. But I'm very interested to know more about your technology
That's right.
over
I'll
here, so we'll
talk to you.
definitely
I'll talk
visit
to you.
you.
Because
on
in
that.
another 5 years, 20% of diagnostics experiment that diagnosis will be done with the AI in
Yes,
future.
yes.
Doctors will use 20% inputs from the
So what's
AI.
the action needed now besides problem solving to what you just said?
Yes.
What is it?
Problem solving, right?
And
The
training the staff, the medical staff,
Look,
to
data is
do that.
available in a lot of hospitals here because I'm here in Saudi Arabia for past 10 years. I know, look, since we have not adopted to technology sooner, most of the universities,
Yeah.
there are a lot of paper patient
Centric.
paper forms available, which is not digitized. That's one thing. This data is very necessary for any kind of diagnosis.
Are you aware of model of care in Saudi?
Yeah.
Are you aware of what
No, no.
happened on the ground?
No, not
All right,
yet.
I would love to tell you
Yes,
about
I
what
would like to discuss
yes.
with you. Yeah.
So that is something that has already started in different cities in the kingdom on a pilot stage.
Excellent.
But it actually talks exactly, and it does exactly what you're just referring to. So,
Thank
I'd love to tell you more about
Sure,
it.
sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
About the role of universities, it's really important to collaborate between the universities and the industry. So if there's a new machine or a new technology, first it comes from the industry, then to universities. But the theory coming from universities first. So it's cooperation, and it's really important to focus on what benefit for the community, which is really important. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much for the discussion. So, my name is Tamin, representing Abdul Latif Jamil. So, my question is more of the corporate side. So, currently, in the strategic level, companies like Toyota, they
Yes.
go for a lean way or in a Kaizen, continuous improvement,
Yes.
stuff like that.
Yep.
And in Caterpillar, they implemented Six Sigma methodology for their,
Yes.
corporate strategy.
Right.
So in order to implement any AI-related projects or machine learning, IoT, is there any standard methodologies that we can adapt at a strategic level? Any new methodology has been identified as a standard methodology which delivers success to the project?
That's a very good question, because what you're asking about now, when Toyota first came, with the whole lean and the Six, Sigma, and following that, and General Electric started with the whole, efficiency model when it comes to manufacturing, and it's well needed because you're looking for 100%, right, accuracy when it comes to that. But believe it or not, big companies, including GE and others, they're saying we're trying to be less Six Sigma oriented. And the reason they're saying that, because when I look into the Six Sigma, and I know this is a highly debatable topic, Six Sigma trains people for accuracy and efficiency at the utmost level. And when I actually do that, then that means I'm minimizing all the levels of innovation, and creativity that possibly could come along, because I have to be process oriented, right? To the maximum level. So how do we really balance between wanting to innovate, wanting to change, but I also need to monitor and make sure that I'm producing the right thing, right? And that goes back to the strategic, thinking. Is there a particular tool? There's a lot of softwares and stuff that have been developed by a lot of consultancy companies. But I feel that the huge part that needs to be done is by the team inside the company. So if they're coached into how to look into today's strategy, what does innovation feel like, when it comes to Abdulatif Jamil, for example. So ALJ has a lot of investment arms in different fields that are not automobile, right? So what does that mean? How does it impact the strategy level? And how do we really cascade it down to every person inside the organization in order to accept the change and to deal with it? So there is a bit of the educational part to the whole culture, and there is a bit of that is our strategy, can we change? What if tomorrow something impacted, the way you do business? Are you willing to look into the strategy again? Hard for companies to do that, but they need to start doing this, right? So there is a whole, again, I go back to mindset, cultural, strategic, and all of that has to play together to achieve what you're actually saying about. But again, I'm happy to talk to you further about, some of the stuff that we did in companies.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Thank
that's
you
it,
so
I
much.
guess.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, panelists.
you.
It was a pleasure to host you all today at World AI Show.